Hi guys, thank you for joining us and welcome to Zoo Time with Mikey and Molly. I am Mikey. Molly is going to be our moderator today, so she'll be fielding all your questions. I think we have some new friends joining us today, so a couple things to start off. For our webinars, what we do is we use our Q&A function. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, we actually don't do the hands or the chat. So if you have a question or you have something you want to say, go ahead and go to the bottom of your screen and go and use that question and answer function. And that way Miss Molly will see your questions or your comments, and then she'll use that at different points to either give me information or ask me questions. So anything you need to say or communicate, please use that Q&A function at the bottom. The other thing is, for those of you joining us today, this is our 4th Zoo Time, I believe. So last week with Teacher Molly, we traveled to the Americas. We looked at animals that live in the United States and some animals that lived in Central and South America. So today we are traveling somewhere else. For those of you who haven't been with us, what we do is we'll meet some animals and we'll talk about them. And then I ask you to use that question and answer function while I'm talking about the animals or showing them. And then Molly will ask those questions out loud to me so we can answer some of them on camera if she doesn't get to type them out and answer them to you. The other thing I'll note for those of you who are new and maybe joining us, Molly and I are actually roommates, and so we don't social distance from one another. So if you see us pass something off or get really close, that's the reason why. It's because we live together. Okay, I'm super excited. Where we are traveling today is a very, very cool place to start, somewhere that I would love to go one day. And I'm gonna point out this continent behind me. It's also a country. Does anyone want to type in their questions and tell me where you think we're going first? Does this look familiar? Has anyone seen something that looks like this before? Where in the world might we be going?
Australia.
Very good. Very, very good. This is in fact Australia. Australia is super cool because it's an island, which means that it's completely surrounded by water. And it's also incredibly biodiverse. Scientists talk a lot about biodiversity. And what that means is how much life is in any given place. So in Australia, there are habitats like rainforests. There are habitats like deserts, which are two really, really different biomes if you think about it, right? There's animals that can live in places where it's really wet, and then animals can live in places where it's really, really dry. So today we're gonna go to Australia and we're gonna visit a couple animals that would be found natively there. So the first animal that we're gonna look at actually would have habitat in this range where this red dot is. And they're actually, I'm gonna show you, it kind of goes up and over like this. Oh no! But this animal has a pretty cool range and it's a very cool animal. So I'm gonna take it out and we will meet our first Australian animal. All right. So this is Azul, and Azul is something called a blue-tongued skink. So I'm going to see if he'll show you his tongue here. He actually uses his tongue to smell, and so sometimes if I just touch him right under the chin here, he'll show us that blue tongue he has. I'm going to leave him here for just a second as he smells. Are both of his eyes closed? Oh, just one of them. He might show us that blue tongue again. So this is a type of lizard that lives in Australia, and it's really cool. These guys have a ton of natural defenses that help them protect themselves from predators that live in Australia. Because it's so biodiverse, there are lots of predators as well as prey animals. So Azul has a couple things that protect him, and that blue tongue is actually one of them. His blue tongue is an example of something called mimicry. So he is actually trying to look like something or mimic an animal that he is not. In the wild, bright colors typically indicate stay away from me. So things that are like bright red or purple or blue, they typically indicate that an animal is venomous or poisonous in some way. Azul is neither of those things. He's not venomous nor poisonous, but when he flicks that tongue or smells things around him and shows his bright blue, that is a warning to other animals that they do not want to mess with him, that he could potentially be able to really hurt them. So that is his first way that he protects himself in his great home of Australia. Another way he protects himself is his really long tail. Blue-tongued skinks have a very special defense about them. they have a muscle at the base of their tail here. And if I were to pull, if he were to feel threatened, he has the ability to use those muscles at the base of his tail to release his tail. So if I was something that wanted to eat him and grabbed him, he could actually drop his tail, leaving it in my mouth, and then run away to safety. Which is really cool because that means he saved his life, right? But the thing is, he also stores extra food and energy in this tail. If you see how it's kind of like big and chunky, if he's out one day and it's like really sunny, he can actually absorb the energy from the sun and he can save it for later when he might not have as much heat. Or if he eats a lot of food one day, if he's able to find a lot of food and then store some of that extra energy again, his tail kind of acts like a reserve, or I say like a refrigerator for him to put stuff that he might need for later and go back to it. So even though he can drop his tail and escape a predator, it's still really valuable for him to be able to keep it. So he only does that in like a worst case scenario. I'm going to tell you one more really special defense he has. He actually looks like something else. So this is a type of lizard. Like I said, you can see his legs here. He has 4 little legs on his body. And he looks like, if he wants to, something called a death adder. A death adder is a type of snake, and it's a very, very venomous snake. And in Australia, there's tons of different types of adders, and the death adder is actually one that he kind of looks like. I'm going to show you a picture real quick. This is a picture of a death adder. So you can see actually how the coloring and the pattern he has looks very similar to Azul, right? So what he would do, there's that blue tongue, what he would do in the wild is if he was threatened, he would stick out that blue tongue and he would actually try to tuck his legs under his body to make himself look like that snake. He wants a predator to think that not only does he have a bright color that makes him dangerous, but that he looks like this other very venomous snake as well. So hopefully predators would want to leave him alone. So this is our first animal that we meet in Australia. You can tell he's a pretty cool looking guy. Are there any questions about Azul or his defenses?
Yeah. How does he drop his tail?
Yeah, so he's only able to drop his tail because of those special muscles he has. Just like you guys have to use muscles to do certain things. If I asked you to do like a jumping jack or to do a sit-up or something like that, you'd have to use the special muscles you have in your body to do those things, right? If I said do a sit-up, but don't use any of your muscles, you wouldn't be able to do it. So it's only because he has those special muscles there that let him. Think of like if you do like a curl or something with your arm, you're using all the muscles. If you weren't able to, if you didn't have those muscles, you couldn't do those things. So it's the same thing with him. Not all lizards have those special muscles that let them drop their tail. So he has them and he has to basically use those. If he drops his tail, I'll say it will grow back. I've actually seen blue-tongued skinks that have dropped their tail, but they don't grow back as nice. You can see his comes to like a really fine symmetrical point here. And if he were to lose it and it would grow back more short, like and a little stubbier and chubbier. It wouldn't be as nice as before. Good question.
Oh, perfect. And you answered Emery Bree's question, which was, can they grow another one?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah.
All right. What does it eat?
Ooh, great question. Azul is what we call an omnivore. So that means that he'll eat plants and vegetables, and he'll also eat meat. So here at the zoo, he gets a pretty varied diet. He eats, for his meat, he eats things called pinkies, which are little tiny mice. He could also eat mealworms if he felt like eating insects. Sometimes those are offered to him in his diet. He gets things like lettuce and cucumbers and different types of vegetables as well. So in Australia, he would eat a lot of what he could find. It kind of depends on availability. So he could eat bugs in Australia. He could eat some of the vegetation and the plants that grow there naturally. Or also he could eat little tiny mammals he could find, like little tiny rats or little tiny mice. Good question.
How fast can he run?
I don't know about that. He can move pretty quickly when he wants to. If you look at his belly, it's pretty close to the ground, right? His arms aren't much bigger or much longer than the rest of his body, which helps him move a little quicker because he's so close to the ground. I don't have a number on that. I don't know. He doesn't, I've never seen him like book it anywhere.
My understanding is that they don't run. They're really slow because they have so many other defenses.
Great.
And
that's a really good point.
Small arms compared to the body.
That makes sense.
How did we get him?
Ooh, Azul was actually surrendered to us. I don't know. So we got him in 2000, the year 2000. And so he's at least 20, which is pretty old for this type of lizard, but we don't know how old he was when we got him. So he could be like 22 or 25 or somewhere around there. It was really, really old he's an old dude. He's a senior citizen.
We have a lot of good questions coming in. I think we might want to move.
Okay, can we take one more?
Yeah, absolutely. Does he camouflage?
Yeah, so that's a good question. He can camouflage. Where he would be found, most of his habitat, I believe, is going to be like scrub desert. And so there are smaller, darker plants in a scrub desert. But if you look at his colors, he's pretty dark. And because Australia is so biodiverse, it really depends where he found himself. If he was somewhere where there was a lot of green and a lot of plants, if you look at him, he wouldn't super camouflage in, but he is going to hang out on the ground. He's not like a tree dweller white. He's not arboreal in any way. So he could camouflage onto the dirt or onto the ground area. Thank you so much for your questions. If we have time at the end, we'll swing back, but we do want to go to our next Australian animal. So I'm going to put Azul back and grab my next animal. One thing I didn't think of, Miss Molly, is we might want to grab, if you can, while I'm doing the next animal, our birthday sheets, because I'm not sure. Our birthday sheets we keep on the fridge in our zoo kitchen, and they have all of our animals' birth year on them, so we know, or hatch year, so we know exactly how old they are, or if we don't have their exact birthday, then we know the year that we got them. So our next animal is kind of the same, but kind of different. He's a very cool looking dude. And it's another type of lizard. So this is Drago, and Drago is a bearded dragon. Drago doesn't actually stick his tongue out as often as Azul. Sometimes he will, because he also uses it to smell. But Azul, because like I said, Azul's like old and he's kind of, he doesn't move a lot. Drago is much more curious. He moves much quicker than Azul does. And even though they both live in the same continent, the same area, they have very different defenses. So if we look at our map of Australia, this is where Azul would be found, and this is where Drago would be found. And like I said, Azul kind of goes up like this. Bearded dragon territory is more like this, but there could be a couple habitats where they overlap, and both of these types of lizards would be present. So differences between these guys. Drago actually doesn't have those muscles I discussed. So if you look at his tail, it's really long still, but it doesn't kind of look as big. And it also, he doesn't do the same thing. He doesn't use it to defend himself or to run away. But he has a very, very special defense. Bearded dragons actually get their name from their neck area here, their chin. And if you look at it, I'm gonna put it right up there. You can see he has all these really cool scales at the bottom. And it looks a little, you can see kind of a difference between, oops, sorry, Drago, between his spiky scales here and his flat scales at the bottom. So what he'll do, if he was super duper threatened, and you can tell he's like, I wanna go somewhere. If he was very, very threatened, let me see if I can get him in a little, there we go. If he was very threatened, what he would do is he actually blows a ton of air into his body. So his beard will blow up really big and his body will blow up really big. Let me see if I could show you his body. Right now he's pretty flat. This can actually get much wider. And like I showed you, he has these really kind of pointy spikes here on his chin and also along the side of his body. And if I touch them right now, they're not sharp. They're very, they're still pokey, but they're not sharp. If he was threatened and he blew all that air into his body, those spikes would get really, really hard. The cool thing is too, when they shed their scales, when they shed the super special scales on the face and on the side of their body, the shed comes off in that kind of really hard pokey material. So I stepped on one time and it went into the bottom of my foot. It was like so strong, it pierced the bottom of my foot. I'm gonna show you a picture though of the #1 way these guys defend themselves, okay? So look at Drago and his face right now. And then look at this picture. So what happens when bearded dragons get threatened? They actually take all that air and they blow it into their face and their beard gets all black. And what that does is it actually makes their head look way bigger than it is to a predator. If you look at Draco's head right now, and then next to that picture, this head to someone that wants to eat him looks much bigger and much scarier. I have one more picture that shows the same thing, but you can also see how inflated the body is in this one. So not only does the beard get really large, the body gets huge too. And so he doesn't have his tail defense, and he doesn't necessarily look like a super venomous snake, but he has this one very, very helpful special defense where he can make his body change colors and actually look much, much bigger than he is, which is so cool. Okay, do we have any questions about Draco?
Can he camouflage?
Draco actually camouflages much better than Azul. In the scrub forest, the same place, he has, you look at his colors, and it might be kind of hard to tell because of the light, but he has like a lot of oranges and browns in him. And when he sits in the sun, he'll actually change colors. He can get, when they absorb a lot of UV light, they can get much, much darker, or if he doesn't have a lot of light, he can get a lot lighter. So these guys are actually better at camouflaging. They also run a lot faster. I don't have a number on their speed, but you can like go to YouTube and watch videos of them running away, and they can run very, very quickly if they're threatened. Good question.
So what are the holes on the side of its face?
That's a really good question. I'm going to ask you guys, does anyone that I'm talking to have holes on the side of their face? He has a hole there, and he has a hole there, and they're not his eyes, but I want to see if someone can tell me, what are those? We have the same holes on the side of our heads, is what I will tell you, friends. And it's really cool. It's one of the things that actually makes lizards a lizard as opposed to snakes. Snakes don't have this special hole that we can see in the same way. We can see that hole.
Waiting for some friends to type in. Go to your Q&A.
And
tell me
that
what those holes are.
It's on his face, right? Just like we have holes on our face.
Maybe a sensory organ of some sort. What? No one?
No? Okay.
No,
I will tell you, my friends. Take your
Wait.
finger.
I got ears. Ears. Ear.
Excellent.
Someone said nose.
His nose, no. His nose is right there. He actually has a really, really tiny nose. It's really hard to see his little, he does have nostrils, but it's very hard. So that's his nostril right there. And then his eye and his ear. So kind of like us, right? We have our eyes and our nose. You have a very small hole on the side of your head, right? So our sound goes directly into our ears when we hear things. And it's the same thing with Draco. Snakes are actually, their ear holes are covered by a thin layer of scales. So they still have an ear, and they can get sound, but we can't see the ear in the same way that we can with Draco. Very good observation. It's pretty cool that we can see the ears similar to how we can see the ears, right?
Yeah. Does it lay eggs?
Does he lay eggs? Well, he doesn't because he's a boy, but yes, bearded dragons do lay eggs. We actually have some really cool ones. I don't have them right here with me, but when bearded dragons lay eggs, they're about that big. And they're pretty squishy, and they have kind of like a tan color to them. So if he was a girl, if we had a girl bearded dragon, she could definitely lay eggs, and that's how her babies would come out. That's where they would come from.
We didn't talk about it, I don't think, but
I'm gonna pop him back.
Okay, does Azul lay eggs?
Oh my goodness. Is he ovoviviparous? Okay, so so Draco is something called oviparous, which means that, or bearded dragons are oviparous, which means that they lay eggs and then the eggs sit and then they eventually hatch. And I think Molly talked about it last week or the week before, that we also have reptiles that are ovoviviparous, which means that instead of laying eggs that then hatch, the eggs actually hatch inside of the body. So there are eggs, but they hatch inside of the body. And then when the babies were to be, when they come out, it almost looks like a live birth because the eggs hatch inside and then they come out in kind of like a goose egg. But it's really not live birth because the eggs have hatched inside the body. So that's another difference between bearded dragons and blue-tongued skinks. They both have eggs, but some of the eggs come outside and hatch, and some of them are hatched inside of the mom's body. Great questions, friends. Maybe one more?
Yeah, absolutely. What does he eat?
So Draco is actually also an omnivore, but it works a tiny bit differently with them. These are both animals that you can have as pets, and so they're going to have different kind of care as pets or as animals under human care, as opposed to animals that are in the wild. So bearded dragons can also eat things like vegetables and fruits, and they can also eat meat. But from what most scientists recommend, or most doctors recommend, is that bearded dragons need meat until they're about 1 or 2 years old, and then they don't really have the same need anymore, so that they can kind of switch from being omnivorous to herbivorous, but they still like meat as treats. So at the zoo here, Drago gets lots of vegetables. He can have a little bit of fruit. They're kind of depends on their personality too. Like some you guys might have food that you really like and foods that you don't like. And so it's the same thing with our animals. He can eat all of these fruits and vegetables, but he doesn't necessarily like all of them. And then he also will get small amounts of meat, and the meat that he will get is going to be either in like mealworm form or hornworm. He actually really likes hornworms, which you can look up. They're like these green worms that are a larvae form of, I don't know what they turn into, a hornworm? Moths, thank you. And then he also will eat dubia cockroaches sometimes, which are pretty big, but he's really, you saw his little head, how he looks at things, so we'll give him a dubia roach, and then it kind of moves, and then he'll look, and then he gets it in one big bite. So he eats things really, really cool. Okay, maybe we have time for one more question.
Yeah, can Drago shoot blood out of his eyes?
Whoa. No. That would be maybe the coolest defense I've ever heard of, but he cannot do that. His eyes, I don't know if you noticed though, his eyes, sometimes you can actually see little tiny like capillaries or little tiny blood vessels. So if you did notice any red in his eyes, it's just like your eyes. You have them too. And sometimes like if you cough really hard or something, you can break them. So you might see like a little bit of red in your eye, but he can't do that. That would be a very, very cool defense. Okay. We have one more animal that we're going to meet from Australia, and then we're going to move on to our next continent. But let me show you. This is very exciting. So Australia is a huge continent, right? A huge island. And I showed you that this was our blue-tongued skink habitat, and this was our bearded dragon habitat. And this last habitat is actually, we put it in the middle, but it's all of Australia. And I'll tell you guys why. Please give me 1 minute to get this animal out. Hello. All right, so this is Lucky, and Lucky is a cockatiel, and he's actually super excited. He was ready to come out because these birds are incredibly social. And Lucky loves the people that work here. He has a couple really good friends, and he'll let almost anyone take him out and put him on a stinker, but he doesn't like to be touched. If I try to pet him, he actually will like try to bite. He has one really good friend here, Teacher Arad. They've been friends for so long, and he lets Teacher Arad pluck his feathers. He does something called preening. For Lucky, yes. Teacher Arad, not a huge animal fan. Lucky, best bud. So they're super social birds. And why that's important and why that has to do with the habitat that they have is because they move around in groups. So they're not necessarily, they don't have one place that they live, but they're always flying around, and they're kind of nomadic in a sense, where they'll travel. They're looking for water. So they'll move depending on where there's available water sources. So cockatiels in the wild typically live in either pairs or small flocks. And those small flocks, they spend a lot of their time socializing. So I don't know if you can hear him, but he actually makes little tiny vocalizations. He's very melodic, so he makes beautiful songs. He can whistle very, very nicely. And he loves to do that. When people whistle at him or come and sing with him, that's how he socializes, and he very much enjoys it. So in the wild, these birds, like I said, they either live in pairs or they live in their little small flocks, and they sing together and socialize, which is a lot of talking, also preening. And what preening means is to kind of like pull out your feathers, just how like your hair naturally falls out when you like brush it or take a shower. These guys will have to get, hi. They have to get their feathers out so they can grow and molt them. So they'll do that to each other. They'll preen, they'll pull each other's feathers out, and they'll sing songs to each other. And then they fly around and they look for water and food. And there are really cool sightings sometimes in Australia, where if there's big water supplies, there can actually be hundreds of cockatiels that will come and congregate at one time. So let me show you this picture. This is a picture, and you can see all these cockatiels are actually gathered around a water source. So this isn't necessarily one flock. It's probably multiple flocks that have landed at the same place for the same purpose of getting food and water. And then obviously, because they're social birds, There's not really competition that other animals would compete like over territory. They're very social, and it's actually kind of exciting for them to be able to socialize with other groups. I'm going to show you. So Lucky, if you can see, he's holding on to my finger here. And cockatiels are actually small parrots. They're in the parrot family. And so one thing that's really, really special about them is their toes. Most birds have 4 toes. This is not all of them, but most birds have 4 toes, and 3 of them go forward and 1 of them goes backwards. But parrots are what we call zygodactyls, which means that they have 2 toes that go forward and 2 toes that go backward. And that helps them because of where they live, how they forage for food. These guys are really big seed eaters. So they want to be able to climb up to places and hang on to trees where they need to be able to get seeds. That's where their food comes from. So I'm going to show you. This is an example of a coot, and you can see, so 3 toes in the back and 1 that goes backwards. And this is a coot is basically like a duck. It's a type of bird, like a waterfowl. So that's 3 toes forward, 1 backward. I have a barn owl, which is the same thing. These are birds of prey that eat other birds, or other animals, I should say. And we have 3 toes forward and 1 backwards. But because Lucky is a type of parrot, he's got 2 forward, and he actually has 2 in the back there that holds on. So this is our other animal that's from Australia. This is another animal that people frequently own as pets now, but there are huge populations of them natively in Australia. All right, Miss Molly.
All right, what does he eat?
So he's a big seed eater. Let me see if he actually has, I guess I could just show the millet. So this is something called millet, which is like a little tiny, it's super duper small. And this is one of his favorite treats. Let me see if he'll actually eat one right now. You can see how he takes it with his beak. So I'm going to put it between my fingers, and it's really small, but he can just actually take his beak and grab it from between my fingers. And he loves it. This is not what he'll eat all the time, but what he does eat, he just eats a lot of seeds. Sometimes he'll get a little bit of vegetable in there, but because he's a parrot, like I said, that's his primary thing, is that he's just gonna forage for seeds. So that's like his favorite food and the main thing that he needs in his diet.
Can you talk a little bit about the crest?
Yeah, so the crest is his special feathers that you'll notice up top of his head here. So, oh my goodness, he's so excited. When birds do that, when he does that kind of shakeout, it means that he's really comfortable. If birds are not comfortable, if they're flighted, a bird that can fly, they want to be at a high place. Typically, they want to be able to observe everything that's happening. So you'll see that Lucky has both of his feet on me. If he was looking for somewhere to escape to, or if he wanted to fly away, he would be as light as possible. He might go to the bathroom to make himself a little lighter, and then he would be looking for places to fly. Anyway, so his crest, these special feathers on top of his head, they kind of give us an idea of how he's feeling or what he's up to. I compare it to like a dog's tail. If I see a dog and it's wagging its tail back and forth and it looks like it's smiling, I probably have a good idea the dog is happy. If the dog's tail is kind of cowered in between his legs, that tells me it might be scared. If a dog's ears are back, it might be upset. There's different body language that we can learn how animals are feeling. And so these crests are his special feathers. And just like with a dog's tail, you can read and learn how that animal might be feeling based on its body language. The crest is kind of the same. So right now his crest is a tiny bit up, but it's pretty relaxed. That's kind of a standard position that his crest would be in. If something was alarming, he might put his crest straight up. Did you like that? If there's a pitch change, or if there's a loud noise or something like that, you might see it go straight up. If he was really upset or scared, sometimes he'll push it actually straight back down. So there's not like a one size fits all for it, but his crest does move based on kind of like his feelings and what he's doing and how he feels.
Can he lay eggs?
So Lucky, again, is a boy, and so he would not be able, we've met all boys today, he wouldn't be able to lay eggs, but cockatiels do lay eggs. Yeah, birds are egg layers. That's how they have their babies. So depending on the type of bird, some of them will lay eggs in like the sand, or some of them will bury them in a hole. There's different ways some of them build nests, but cockatiels for sure can lay eggs. They're also warm-blooded, which is pretty cool. A lot of people don't know that about birds. They're warm-blooded, just like us.
Can he fly high?
So Lucky, here we do clip his wings a little bit. We can see he has his long tail feathers at the back. Those are pretty long. So he can fly. He actually does fly up semi-frequently. If he gets startled, he can easily fly off my hand and try to go somewhere else. But he doesn't fly super duper fast. In the wild, they fly very far distances because, again, they're looking for water. So cockatiels in the wild will fly for a very, very long time, and they can fly high and then come and land down. So Lucky does fly, but he doesn't fly long distances here. He'll just fly short little jumps.
How old is he?
11. Will you check if I'm 7? 2013. Okay, so he's 7 years old this year. So he's still a young man.
Yeah.
Maybe one more.
What color can they be, and why does he have pink cheeks?
That's a great question. Let me see if I can get his cheeks really close to you. He actually has orange cheeks. You don't like being so close to the camera. He has orange cheeks that you can see on his little yellow head. So this is a great question. They actually come in different color morphs, which means that these cockatiels have been bred to have different colors. So they're not always the gray, yellow, and orange that he is here. Sometimes they can be like more white on their whole body. Sometimes they can be more yellow or more orange. They can have lots of different colors. In the wild, typically, cockatiels, the males were the only ones who had those orange spots. So when you can tell animals apart based on how they look, it can be called sexually dimorphic, which means that the boys and the girls look different. You can tell the males and the females apart. So that used to be the case in Australia, that all of the boys had the orange cheeks and you could tell them apart from the girls because the girls didn't have the orange cheeks. But because there's such a large pet trade for these guys now, a lot of girls, most cockatiels now have the orange cheeks, whether they're male or female. And there's also some morphs that have bred out the cheek coloration. So you could have a boy that doesn't actually have those orange spots. But if you were to go to Australia and see, like, say, two cockatiels next to each other, one with spots and one without, it's a pretty good guess that you have a male and a female cockatiel together. That is a great question. Thank you guys so much.
Rod actually had a really cool thing going back to the lizards. He said that horned lizards can squirt blood from their eyes. Some types.
Whoa.
And even though Drago looks like a horned lizard.
He's not. Very cool. I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, and he says hi to any Duvenex students.
Oh, Mr. Arad says hi to any Duvenex students. I am going to put Lucky back, and we are going to move on to our next continent, but I am going to do a quick shout out when I put my friend Lucky back. Okay. So before we move to our next continent, I want to say hi to everyone joining us. I think we have some new friends that haven't attended Zoo Time before, so welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. I also want to say hi to Mrs. Benz's TK class. Hi, Miss Benz. I know Miss Benz for multiple years now. She always brings her TK class to do magnets with us, and because of the shelter in place, we weren't able to do that this year, but I know that they're joining us on Google Classroom, so welcome very much. And then a very, very, very special welcome to my EPAC's third graders, Miss Grubb's class. Hi, friends. I'm very, very excited to have you here, and I hope you guys are having fun. So thank you very much.
And Rod wanted us to mention that all of our previous recordings are on YouTube if you missed them.
Yeah, so on our channel, this will actually get there in a couple days, but we have a YouTube channel, which is the Palo Alto Junior Museum and Zoo. Some variation of that. And we have our previous Zoo Times recorded there. And we also have some small snippet videos with just like meet some of our animals that we've done previously. So you guys are welcome to go after and check out our YouTube channel where things get posted there. Okay, so we are gonna leave the great biodiverse Australia and we're gonna pop to another very biodiverse continent. Now this continent, it also has deserts, it also has rainforest, has tons of stuff, also a very biodiverse place. This is Africa. And so many times we have animals that are from Africa. We could do a whole African animal program if we wanted to because there's so many animals that live there. But we're gonna start small and work our way up. So we will meet our first African animal. This guy is not large, but he is cool. So this animal is called a giant African millipede. So millipedes are a type of, like a common word, we call them like a bug, but scientifically they are in a group called arthropods. And within the arthropod group, they are in a class called myriapods. So myriapods are basically millipedes and centipedes. They don't have any bones in their bodies. They are invertebrates, and they also have jointed legs or jointed segments. So if you look at my hand, you can see all of those legs. Those are all of the millipede's legs moving underneath its body, which is very, very cool. These guys have a very important job in Africa. These guys are rainforest animals, and let me see if I can actually show you. This is their range right here, right? This one. Yeah, okay. So they are actually on the coast of Africa here, and this little island down here is Madagascar. So this is where they find their range, right here along the coast of Africa. And what these guys do, they are something that's called a detritivore. And what a detritivore is, it's an animal that eats kind of like fallen foliage and maybe trash, and it breaks it down. So what he does in the rainforest is he will move along the forest floor eating things that have fallen. So maybe leaves that have fallen off the tree, maybe skins from fruits that other larger animals have eaten and then fallen to the ground. And he will go along and he'll eat those things. This is his head right here. You can see the antenna there. He has 2 antennae. So he'll eat the foliage and the fallen things, and then he'll move along the forest floor more, and he'll go to the bathroom. And as he goes to the bathroom, his poop is essentially very nutrient rich and very dense in vitamins. And so when he goes to the bathroom and moves along the forest, he's essentially creating new soil. That bathroom is fertilizing things, and it's kind of like a whole circle that goes on through the rainforest, because he eats these things that have fallen, and then he creates new soil, which helps new things to grow for all the animals that live there. So we kind of sometimes think like, oh, bugs, we don't like them. If you found this in your house, you might scream. But this is a very, very docile animal. It's not venomous. A lot of times we think that animals that live in Africa can be like dangerous or venomous, and this guy's not. It literally just goes along and it tries to help the environment which it lives in. These guys are completely herbivorous, so they don't eat any meat at all. It only will eat things, like I said, like vegetables and fruit and lots of foliage, so like lots of leaves and lettuce and things like that. Any questions about the millipede?
Yes. Do they bite?
So their mouth is so small. If they bit, I don't even think you'd be able to feel it, but no, they don't bite, just their food. Sometimes you'll go in and they'll be like stuck to a piece of lettuce, so it's clear that they're eating it, but they don't bite. They are poisonous to other animals. And when I say that, so they're not venomous. If something is venomous, it has to bite you, right? It has to be injected in some way, the venom into your body. Something that's poisonous can be something that you brush against. So he's not poisonous to the touch, but he is poisonous to eat. So if another animal ate him, they can actually secrete something from the back of their body. Here, this is the back of its body. They have like a little slit where they'll go to the bathroom from, but they can also secrete it's kind of like brownish liquid that's not bathroom. It is a type of poison, and it's kind of smelly and sticky. If I get it on my hands, it just stains my hands for a little bit. But if I was an animal that tried to eat him and it got in my mouth, it could taste very bad and make me kind of sick.
How big?
They can get very big. I don't know. 11 inches. Okay. So that's almost a foot if you think about it, right? This guy's probably half of that, but they can get much bigger than that. And this is the largest of all the millipedes. So I actually will show you some millipedes can be very, very small. This is another example of a millipede, and you can tell, well, it's way tinier. It looks a lot bigger than it is right now, but it's very small comparatively. We actually have millipedes that live here. Like you might be able to go in your backyard and dig and you could find one, but the ones we have here are so small they could fit on like my pinky nail, and they're not dark like this all the time. Sometimes they're like really light or white. So it looks nothing like this, but they can get, this is out of all of the types of millipedes, the giant African millipede is the largest one.
Nice. How many legs does it have?
That's an excellent question. So if I really wanted to, I could learn how many legs it has. And how I could do that is they have these things on their backs called segments. So if you see these like lines, each line or each bump is called a segment. And it's almost a little bit of a math problem. So for each segment he has on his body, he has 4 legs. So if I wanted to, I could count them. Say he had 50 segments, and then I would multiply times 4, and that would mean he had 200 legs. But the wild thing is, he grows more legs throughout his lifetime. So because he doesn't have any bones, he's an invertebrate, he has to molt his exoskeleton, which basically means like he takes off the outside of his body and then a new harder one grows around him so he can get bigger. So each time he does that, each time he molts, he actually gets new segments, which means he gets new legs. Typically, millipedes have between, I think it's 80, they start at 80 and go up to about 400.
When they hatch, they have 6.
But what about when they're full grown?
When they grow out their whole life.
Right, okay.
So then almost 300?
Up to 300. I think that the biggest ones can get 400. We could look at that. But yeah, he's basically gonna have different numbers of legs throughout his entire life. I'm going to say one more thing about him and then we have to move on. Sorry. But when he defends himself, he has a very special defense mechanism, which is that you see right now his body's he's relaxed and just climbing. They actually curl themselves into this very special ball. So they tuck their heads into the center and they wrap the rest of their body around. And if you think of that, if you were like a predator and you wanted to eat him, if you were a prey animal, think about it. If you were a prey animal, would you want someone to take a bite of your head or your toes? You know, and I would probably pick my toes. And so when he wraps himself like this, he's trying to protect his head. He's trying to keep the parts of him that are more important safe, so that it would be really hard to tell for a predator. And I think this is very cool. I'm not good at math, but this is a super cool math thing. They actually follow a pattern. So when they wrap their bodies up, they demonstrate something that's found in nature called the Fibonacci number sequence. And you can look that up. It's a really cool, and like I said, I'm not good at math, but I can actually remember that one because it's just addition. You just add numbers together. So it's something that's found, and when they roll themselves like that, you can actually find that Fibonacci number sequence in them, which is very, very cool. Okay, I'm gonna put him back and move on to our next African animal. I will say, my friends, this is my favorite animal. Don't tell Scully. In the whole zoo. Okay, so this is Devin, and Devin is a type of snake. Oh, look at that. And the type of snake he is called a ball python. So Africa has tons of different types of snakes, and a lot of them are venomous, but Devin is not a venomous snake. You can see he's probably about 5 feet long, maybe a little shorter. And the type of snake he is, he's not only called a ball python, but he's a constrictor. So what constrictors do is they don't have any venom. They use their body and all the muscles and all the bones he has. And if he needed to eat something, he would take his body and he would wrap it around that prey and he would squeeze it. So he would use all the muscles and the bones he has to squeeze it. And then once it was dead, he'd be able to eat it. And let me see if I can get his mouth up here. He gets a little head shy, which means he gets nervous about his head. But if you look at his mouth there, he can actually open his mouth bigger than his head is. He has a special hinge in the middle of his jaw here so that he could actually eat something about as big as his body. Now I'm going to show you a picture because I just showed you how the millipede defends itself, how it protects itself. And Devin is called a ball python because he will do exactly the same thing. If he is threatened, he'll roll himself into a ball with his head in the middle. And if I showed you this, you might have a very hard time telling me where the head of this animal is. It kind of just looks like a big blob. And so ball pythons are called that because they will actually roll themselves into a ball to protect themselves from something that wanted to eat it. We're going to start taking questions now because I want to make sure I hit the things that you guys are interested in. So any questions about Devin, the ball python? Devin is a boy. It's pretty hard to tell on reptiles. A lot of times you have to do a blood test to tell, but I'll show you. He actually has a part on his body called the cloaca, which is like where he would go to the bathroom from. And if it was a girl, that's where he would have his babies from. So it's really hard to tell. His cloaca is actually right there. And it's almost impossible to tell where it is. But when he goes to the bathroom, that opens. And sometimes, if you're watching, you can actually see their organs inside, which can tell you if it's a boy or a girl because males and females have different sex organs. But without that, it would be impossible to tell. So we do a blood test. So he is a boy. Devin is a boy.
And then why does he have that pattern?
Ooh, so ball pythons also can have different morphs. This is actually a really great camouflage pattern for him. The way it's broken up, if you look at it, he's beautiful, but he has kind of like circles and dots and different colors. The bottom of his body is actually a different color. On the bottom of his body, he has these white scoots that help him to pull himself and to move. Not all snakes have different morphs on top and bottom. Sometimes they're the same throughout, but his pattern actually does really, really help him camouflage. What is it? I'm trying to remember the word of when you have one color on top and one on the bottom. Counter shading. Thank you. Thank you. That's what we call it in science, when they have a dark color on top and a light on bottom, or vice versa. Yeah. Do we have one more question?
How old is he?
Devin is one of my favorites because he was hatched in the same year Mikey was born, which is 1991. So this year, Devin is 29 years old, which is so old, very old for a ball python. In captivity, they can live to be about 35, but that's like a very, very long life as well. So Devin, we're very happy to have him. He's a very good snake.
Is he poisonous?
He is not poisonous. He is actually not venomous either. So again, remember I said, if something is poisonous, I either bite it and it poisons me, or I touch it and it poisons me. Neither of those things would happen with him. And if he's venomous, if he bites me, then I have his venom inside of me, but he doesn't actually have any venom. So if you were to bite someone, it would just be a bite. There would be no venom involved. You'd be fine. Okay, I'm gonna hand Devin back to Miss Molly, and we have one more animal to meet in Africa. Oh my goodness, it's been such a day. Thank you, Miss Molly.
You're doing great.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so our last animal in Africa. Okay, so sorry, I didn't even show you guys. This was our millipede. Devin, the ball python. His range is right here. And then this last one is our last animal. And our last animal is actually a nocturnal animal. So it's sleeping and I have to wake it up. But additionally, it's a mammal. And if you watched our other zoo times with Molly, you'll know that because mammals are actually susceptible to COVID-19, we have to put on masks and we have to use gloves to handle our mammals. So hopefully you guys can still hear me okay. I just took off my glasses because they will fog up. So I have my mask on. I'm gonna put on my gloves, and then I'm gonna wake up our last animal from Africa, who is nocturnal. And he might be kind of grouchy, but we'll see if we can get him to relax a little bit. Okay, so this is Larry, and Larry is an African hedgehog. I want to see, so sometimes he's not even doing it all that much right now. He's pretty relaxed. So I wanted to show you, he's so cute, right? African hedgehogs actually utilize the exact same defense. I'll show you a picture after. So just like the millipede rolls itself into a ball, and just like Devin would roll himself into a ball, Larry, the African hedgehog, could also do the same thing. And what he's trying to do is not actually protect his head, he's trying to protect his tummy. Because I don't know if he'll let me show you, his tummy doesn't have any spines on it. His tummy is naked. And so he just has spines on the back of his body. And so he wants to protect that inside part where he doesn't have those spines. In Africa, these guys actually would go 3 miles a day to find their food. If you look at his face, let's show them your face, Larry. He doesn't have great eyesight. He has a long nose and he has those little cupped ears. And that's what he's gonna use to find his food. His eyesight isn't great. So he listens and he smells. And like I said, he would go up to 3 miles a day to find his food. I don't know if he will. I want to see if he's going to eat for us, though, okay? So give me 1 second. Thank you so much, Miss Molly. Perfect. Would you mind opening that back? Thank you so much. So we're going to see. We're just putting some mealworms on the tray here to see if Larry would like to eat them for you. I don't know if he will, but like I said, he has his little nose, is really good at finding things. So you can see he's smelling for those mealworms, and then he's eating them right away. It's very fast, very good. Okay, and now if we have any questions about Larry, I'll take a couple of hedgehog questions.
How sharp are his spines?
You know, it depends who you ask. They're pretty sharp. They hurt my hands. I have gloves on right now, so I don't feel them quite as much, but they are pretty sharp. And he didn't really do any reaction. When I picked him up, he kind of just sat there Sometimes hedgehogs, though, will do a little like jump when they get startled. So if that's the case, when he jumps, every time poking my hand over and over. So like I said, right now, and my hands are kind of used to it. I'm used to touching him, but they're pretty pointy. They can actually hurt if they wanted to. In the wild, this is obviously one of their main defense are their spines. And what he would do is something called self-anointing. So he would eat.
Oh.
He would eat.
Oh, okay. We lost video for a second, but came back.
He would eat bugs that maybe are poisonous. I'm going to show you his face one more time. I'm going to put him down. He would eat some bugs that are poisonous, and he would do something called self-anointing. So what that is he eats the bugs, he chews them up really, really well, and then he like spits on himself or like licks himself with those bugs. And what that does is it covers his spines in kind of like a poison. And so then if I'm an animal that wants to eat him and I take a bite or I put my mouth onto those spines, I now have that poison from those bugs in my mouth, which is really bad for me and really gross. Hedgehogs have something called immunity. They have like a little bit of immunity to things that are poisonous sometimes. And so that allows them to chew up those bugs and then self-anoint. I want to show you one picture really quick. This is actually a European hedgehog. So not all hedgehogs are African hedgehogs, but this is a picture of a European hedgehog, and this is its face in the center there. It's almost wrapped its whole body closed to protect itself, and then just like our two other African animals. Okay, friends, we are almost out of time, but I will take one or two questions.
Yeah. Does he only protect his tummy or his head too?
Good question. Very good question. He will protect his head too. He'll actually, when you pick him up, sometimes if he's in that ball, just like with this one, it's almost impossible to tell what's what, right? So his head is in fact in that, but his tummy is the part where like if I was a predator and I bit his head on top, his head still has spines on it a little bit. But if I were to be able to bite him in his tummy, there's no spines there. So he definitely is protecting his head too, but his tummy is maybe his most vulnerable because it's his soft spot. And a lot of times predators will try to find like sleeping hedgehogs to eat because they're easier to I guess like surprise, right? That they're not going to be able to defend themselves as quickly.
Can you pet them from head to back?
When we let friends pet them in classes, we do pet them from head to back if they're calm enough. But the thing is, like I said, they still do those little jumps. So even if I'm being really gentle with my fingers and touching from head to back, if he jumps, it's still gonna poke me. And I will say, friends, whenever we bring a hedgehog, this is lucky, I'm very excited. When we bring a hedgehog into class, everyone is always saying like, oh, they're so cute. They're so cuddly. I want one for a pet. And I will say that they're actually illegal to have as pets in California because they are omnivores and they eat everything they could find. They'll eat all the plants they can find, all the little lizards, all the little mammals. And so California says you actually we have special permits at the zoo to own them because we don't want them destroying our natural plants and wildlife here. Okay, let me do one last question, Miss Molly.
We don't have any open questions right now, but if anyone wants to type in any last questions or observations, comments, thoughts, we might hang on.
Yeah, we'll hang out for 1 second. Thank you guys so much again for joining us. Lucky was very excited to be able to see you guys. He was singing the whole time. He was very excited. I will show you one thing. A lot of times the question I get is about the difference between porcupines and hedgehogs. These are some porcupine quills. These are African porcupine quills. There's also porcupines that don't have as long of quills. These are actually some South American or like prehensile tail porcupine quills, and they're much smaller. The difference between a hedgehog's spine and a porcupine's quill has to do with the way it's attached. So a hedgehog's spines are just like our hair. If I brush my hair, some of it might fall out. When I sleep, some of it might fall. The same thing is true with the hedgehog. Their spines fall out just like our hair. A porcupine's quill actually will come out with touch. So you guys saw me putting my hands on Larry and nothing stuck into my hand. If I did that same thing with a porcupine, there are little tiny barbs on the back of the porcupine's quills and they would in fact stick in my hand. So it's a little bit of structure. They're different animals completely, but that's one of the main differences between their forms of protection.
Can you go over what the hedgehog eats again?
Yeah, absolutely. So hedgehogs are omnivorous, which means that they'll eat anything they can find. And we actually call hedgehogs opportunistic omnivores, which means that they really, really will, whatever they can find, if they can eat it, they will. So they'll eat any vegetables they can find in Africa. And because they're so close to the ground, there are a lot of like shrubs and plants that they'll try to eat. They'll also eat any meat they can find. So any bugs they can find, any small reptiles, any small mammals, even if there were small enough bird eggs from other birds that had laid eggs, they would eat those things too. So the hedgehogs really, really will eat almost anything that they can. Their mouths are kind of tiny, so they're limited in how big of stuff they can eat, but they'll eat almost anything they can find.
Do hedgehogs lay eggs?
Hedgehogs do not lay eggs. Hedgehogs are mammals, just like you and I, so they give live birth. So when we actually had hedgehog babies here. We had a family here for a while. We had mom and dad, Salt and Pepper, and they had a baby named Baby Spice. So when they come out, they are already alive. And it takes a couple days, about 2 or 3 days to for their spines to harden. So when they come out, they almost look like little tiny hairs on their back, but then within a couple days they toughen up and they start to get sorry left with those spines.
Can you visit the Junior Museum and Zoo right now?
Unfortunately, you cannot visit the Junior Museum and Zoo right now. We are still in shelter in place. The reason that Molly and I can actually come in is we are considered essential workers because we do animal care. So for example, when this webinar ends today, Molly and I are gonna go through all of the animals, all the animals you've met and actually all of our education animals, and we will weigh them. So the reason that we're actually coming in is to do animal care, which the government deems essential. We are essential workers in that sense. And so that's why we can do these super cool webinars. But we are very, very excited for the day that you guys can come back and visit us. And we are trying to see just when that can be, because we miss you guys and our friends miss you too. All of our animals miss you guys.
Can we have any of these animals as pets?
Yes, you can have all of these animals as pets, but
No, hedgehog.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay.
You can have all of the animals that we've met as pets besides the hedgehog. Hedgehogs are illegal to have as pets in California. There are other states where you can have them. But all of the other animals you've met, you can actually have as pets. I just do want to say to remember that pets are a really big responsibility and they are a really big commitment. And so you need to make sure that you can responsibly take care of them for their whole life. Some of these animals live a really long time. I don't know if any of my friends watching are as old as Devin. So imagine if you got Devin today as a baby, and then how old are you going to be in 30 years? It's a long, long time.
Do you have any of these animals pets at home, Mikey?
I do. I have a bearded dragon at home. His name is Fifi. He is 11 years old, which is pretty old for a bearded dragon. I got him when he was 8. He actually needed a home from someone else who couldn't take care of him. And so he is a senior citizen at home that I have.
And then can the hedgehog spikes come out?
Good question. So they can come out just like your hair, but they can't come out. They don't like shoot them, or they don't get stuck in anything. I can't even pull one out really if I wanted to. It's just they come out on their own.
And we have thank you very much. We had a great time. Love TK from Springer.
Thank you, Springer TK. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I will, I'm gonna mute this. So you guys, if you have any further questions on the Q&A, you can shoot those there and we'll try to type out the answers. But thank you guys so much for joining us. It was a really good time. Come back next week. Teacher Molly is gonna be showing us some very special animals from a different type of habitat. So I'm very excited.
Also have thanks from Westmont Warriors and EPACs.
Woo! Thank you, friends, so much. West Side Warriors? That's
Westmont.
Westmont Warriors.
That's apparently
That's
something
cool.
to do with EPACs.
Oh, cool. EPACs, friends, I miss you guys so much. I'm so glad you joined us. Thank you, thank you. All right, I will see you guys hopefully next week on Zoo Time. Thank you, thank you, thank you.